In the last video, I showed you how to swatch and determine the stitch and row gauge. We're using the example of trying to prepare to knit this Easy VT. This one is exclusively for little girls, but I do have some similar tops for adults that would work on the Bond and Knitsmart machine in my bulky cotton tops collection. Those patterns will work on Bonds and Knitsmart machines also, so in case you need one, I will place a link to this book in the program notes. This pattern is written for the use with number 3, otherwise known as double knitting weight yarn, or DK weight, at a gauge of 5 stitches and 8 rows per inch. In the previous video, we swatched it on a Knitsmart machine, and the closest that we could come to the target gauge was 5.5 stitches, 7 rows per inch. Whatever shall we do? Don't worry, all is not lost. The first thing to discover is, if we follow the pattern exactly, what size will the finished garment be? The pattern states that there are 3 sizes, and they will finish to 24, 26, and 28 inches at the chest, based on 5 stitches per inch. The first thing to do is find the relationship between the original gauge and our new gauge by dividing one into the other. I'm going to divide the original gauge by the new gauge, and the result is 0.9090 and on and on and on. In this case, we would round that up to 0.91. That's the closest to accurate, useful expression of the relationship between the two numbers. Next, we'll take the size that we are hoping to achieve and multiply the finished size, the 24 inches, times 0.91. Another way of thinking about this is that we know we're going to get 91% of the 24, and we want to know what that is in inches, and it is 21.84 inches. When we do the same thing for the other 2 sizes, we find out that the 26-inch size will actually come out 23.66, and the 28-inch size will actually come out 25.5 roughly inches. You'll recall that the original sizes were 24, 26, and 28, and sometimes the simplest thing to do is just decide that 25.6 inches is close enough. You will make the largest size, even though what you really are after is the medium size, and knowing that you only get 91% of the largest size, it's going to be very close to that, and that may be acceptable. If the pattern tells you what any other dimensions are, such as from the neckline to the sleeve hem, you can double check all of the ones that are based on stitch gauge using the same method that we use to determine the chest measurement. You may also wish to look at some length measurements, depth of neckline and armhole, depth from underarm to hem, as well as total garment length. But don't use the proportion for stitches to figure row things. And here's why. The relationship between the new and old stitch gauges and the new and old row gauges may not be the same. In this case, they are definitely not. Our actual stitch gauge is 1.14 times the original stitch gauge in terms of the size of fabric it will create. That may be okay with us, but we do need to know. Here's what it would mean. If the original length of the top was expected to be 14 inches long, we want to know how long the new length will be, so multiplying the original 14-inch expectation by 1.14, the relationship between the old and new row gauge, we discovered that our top will be 15.96, or functionally 16 inches long. And then we can decide if that is okay, or if we need to shorten it by a few rows, working with our actual row gauge. What I've shown you is the simplest thing to do. But if you wanted to make the 28-inch size, what I just showed you doesn't help you any. So in the next video, I'll show you how to adjust stitch and row counts so that you can get the hoped for size in the new gauge even though it is not the same as the original gauge.